Hi there, how's it going? It's me, Mike from Phuket Pals. I put out on the community tab through the YouTube channel last week if anyone wanted any particular videos made, and quite a few people got back and said they wanted some videos for the RLA test. So I thought I'd repay in kind for that and go through a full RLA test, kind of bit by bit, I suppose over the next few weeks or so. The RLA test is pretty long and dense, as you all know. So what I'll do is I'll break it up into bite-sized pieces and just make it manageable. Hopefully try and instill some confidence into you if you haven't got that confidence already. Okay, so we'll start off with part one of the RLA test, which is the multiple choice section. Here we have 22 questions and 35 minutes, okay? So 22 questions, 35 minutes. It's not an awful lot of time. But the thing is, with questions just like the one we're going to look at here, you will find it almost impossible to get a really, really good score in this if you do not read the passage. So I'm constantly telling my students you should be reading in your free time, okay? Not only doing past papers, not only doing exam questions to practice for the RLA, but you need to be reading novels as well. Now, let me break down what I mean by this. So there are two different types of reading skill. The first type is intensive reading, and the second type is extensive reading. So the first type, intensive reading, what that means is just like what you're doing here in the GED RLA test. So you get shorter extracts from longer passages, and you have to read them very, very, very quickly and then answer the questions that follow. That is intensive reading because you're intensively looking at a text and figuring out what's going on. Then, extensive reading, that is reading a novel. It could be non-fiction, it could be fiction, whatever. But you're reading for longer periods of time. You're focusing on overall comprehension of a story or whatever it is. And the reason extensive reading is so important is because it's through extensive reading that you improve your reading speed. It's through extensive reading that you pick up a lot of new vocabulary. Okay, you also improve your punctuation with your writing. You also improve your sentence structure, your grammar range, your grammar accuracy, and tons of other stuff as well. So if you're one of those students who only looks at past exam questions to practice, well, you're losing out. You should be doing extensive reading as well. Now, many students will say, I don't have time, I have to do the test quickly, I've got... this is for a new job application, or I need to go to higher education, whatever. Well, that's okay, but you need to plan earlier, give yourself it depends on your academic background, but you need to give yourself a large amount of time to prep for this test so you can have a combination of extensive and intensive reading when you're leading up to the test. Okay, so let's have a look at this first part here, okay? So this is the first reading, questions 1 through 5, and it says, excerpt adapted from The Finished Story by Lucy Maud Montgomery. Now, always go to the questions first, just to get a kind of feel for what you're being asked. And don't panic when you see the length of the reading, okay? Sometimes students look at the reading and they go, I can never do that. I'm just going to guess. Don't be silly, okay? You'll have prepped yourself well enough that you can look at the questions and the length of the reading with confidence and think, I'm going to make this happen. So let's look at the questions themselves. Number 1, what can be inferred about the narrator? Okay, now this word inferred, okay, the other word is inference here. So we have the word infer, which is a verb, and we have the word inference, which is a noun. So you will definitely see these words, not only on the RLA test, but on the social studies test, and also on the science test as well. Maybe even on the maths test, actually. What does it mean to infer? Infer means that you look at some evidence that's available. That could be in the text, for example, maybe about a character, and then you make a guess based on that evidence about what that character might do in the future or might think in the future or something like that. For example, let's say I'm standing teaching at the whiteboard in my classroom and my students are in front of me and I'm writing on the whiteboard. I turn around to them. I don't say anything, but my stomach rumbles. My stomach rumbles. So the question is, what can my students infer about me based on the rumbling of my stomach, which is the evidence, okay? So my students can infer that perhaps I haven't eaten breakfast, or perhaps I'm going to have to be rushed to hospital for some rare stomach complaint. I hope it's not the latter. But yeah, it's more likely I haven't eaten anything, okay? So my students infer that based on the evidence. And that's what you have to do in the GED test as well, in many different subjects. You have to look at the evidence in the text, okay, think about the evidence clearly, calmly, and then make an inference or make a guess based on that evidence about whatever the question is asking you. So here it says, what can be inferred about the narrator? So you should know the narrator is the person telling the story. Okay, so we can see here that this type of question, we really have to do a bit of reading before we can tackle this. We can't just jump in and make guesses here without any reading. So the second question says, which quotation from the passage supports the theme of the passage? Okay, the theme of the passage. So what is the theme? Okay, so the theme is like the overall idea of the passage. Okay, the overall, let's call it the message, I suppose, that the passage wants us to know. Okay, so it could be, maybe the theme of the passage could be about the fading of youth over time. The theme of the passage could be about, I don't know, coming of age. You know, a student who's 18 going into the world of work at 19 and becoming an adult. This could be a theme as well. So it's like an overall idea of the passage. So here we have a quotation that supports the theme. So again, we can't really guess anything here. We have to do a bit of reading. Number 3, what effect does the narrator's story have on Miss Sylvia? What effect does the narrator's story have on Miss Sylvia? Okay, so that's a question that we could probably scan for, but it's maybe not a good idea because we might miss something. So we'll just keep an eye out for that once we read. Number 4, this is a classic RLA type question where you have a character in the middle and you have to say which of the adjectives, which of the describing words belong to this particular character's personality. So are they hostile, caring, friendly, envious, sensitive, or whatever? And then number 5, why is it so important to Miss Sylvia to have the ending of the story changed? So why is it so important to Miss Sylvia to have the ending of the story changed? We'll have to look out for that as well. Okay, so we've kind of looked at the questions. We're now familiar with what we're being asked to do. So it's time to read as quickly and as clearly as we can. So, the finished story. She always sat in the corner of the west veranda at the hotel, knitting something white and fluffy, or pink and fluffy, or pale blue and fluffy. Always fluffy, at least, and always dainty. Shawls and scarves and hoods, the things were, I believe. When she finished one, she gave it to some girl and began another. She was old. Okay, so here you can see in the first paragraph, we're introduced to some lady who sits on the outside part of a hotel who knits stuff. And she gives these things, the scarves, the hoods, whatever she's knitting, she gives it to some girl and began another, okay? And then we get some characterization here, okay? So this is some characterization. We learn more about the character. She was old with that beautiful, serene old age, which is as beautiful in its way as youth. Her girlhood and womanhood must have been very lovely to have ripened into such a beauty of 60 years. Okay, so it's an old woman we're dealing with here. And she's a beautiful old woman. She has aged well. She it just seems quite content, quite happy in her, let's say, we can infer it's her retirement, and she's just knitting and giving things to young girls on the balcony or the veranda of the hotel. For the first 2 days after the arrival at the hotel, she sat in her corner alone. There was always a circle of young people around her. Old folks and middle-aged people would have liked to join in. But Miss Sylvia, while she was gracious to all, let it be distinctly understood that her sympathies were with the youth. Okay, so we find out more about this old lady here. Her name's Miss Sylvia. Okay, Miss Sylvia. She's not married. Okay, so she's an old lady of 60, and she's not yet married. So we can infer multiple things from that. She's a miss. So think of all the reasons why people don't get married. Okay, we can infer these things about Miss Sylvia. And her sympathies were with the youth. So this old lady, Miss Sylvia, is more interested in young people than she is of middle-aged people or old people. Okay, so you could say she's young at heart. We can infer that she's young at heart. Miss Sylvia liked us all. Okay, Miss Sylvia liked us all, but I was her favorite. She told us so frankly and let it be understood that when I was talking to her and her shawl was allowed to slip under one arm, it was a sign that we were not to be interrupted. Okay, so here's the narrator. The narrator says that she is the favorite of Miss Sylvia. That is the narrator talking. We were sitting on the veranda at sunset. Most of the hotel people had gone for a harbour sail. I was reading one of my stories to Miss Sylvia. In my own excuse, I must allege that she tempted me to do it. Miss Sylvia had discovered that I was a magazine scribbler. Okay, now that's a bit of students often see this bit of language here and go, what is a magazine scribbler? Well, to scribble just means to write kind of nonsense on a piece of paper. To scribble, to kind of doodle, I suppose, or make some kind of markings on a page. So the narrator is saying she was a magazine scribbler, not Miss Sylvia, but the narrator was a magazine scribbler. So the narrator must have written for a magazine at some time, and not a very formal magazine, because she uses the word scribbler, which is very informal in the context. I was a magazine scribbler, and moreover, that I'd shut myself up in my room that very morning and perpetrated a short story, just written a short story. Nothing would do, but I read it to her. Okay, so we can see the interaction here between the narrator and between Miss Sylvia, and that Miss Sylvia is interested in the stories written by the narrator, who used to work or write for a magazine. It was a rather sad little story. The hero loved the heroine, and she loved him. There was no reason why he should not love her, but there was a reason why he could not marry her. When he found out that he loved her, he knew that he must go away. Oh, this is very sad. We've got heartbreak here, guys. Heartbreak, okay? So when he found out he loved her, he must go away. But might he not at least tell her his love? Might he not at least find out for his consolation if she cared for him? So here we've got heartbreak, guys. In this story of the narrators, we have serious broken heart stuff going on. Can I do a broken heart? There we go. That's as good as I can do, sorry. So we have a broken heart story from the narrator. And again, if this person is writing stories about broken hearts, we can make an inference or infer that perhaps something in her life happened that was similar to this, that maybe she had her heart broken, and that's why she's pouring her own emotions onto the page. We'll find out. There was a struggle. He won and went away without a word. Okay, so the lady in the story, the heroine, the female character, she was left without a word by this guy, believing it to be the more manly course. So the man he's gone away. He's left the lady, and there you go. So that was the narrator's story. When I turned the last page of the manuscript and looked up, Miss Sylvia's soft brown eyes were full of tears. She lifted her hands, clasped them together, and said in an agitated voice, here's a quotation from her, "Oh no, don't let him go away without telling her. Just telling her, don't let him do it." So, this is significant, guys, because here we have Miss Sylvia. Miss Sylvia is in tears. Okay, her brown eyes were full of tears. So the question is, as a reader, why would Miss Sylvia be so emotionally involved in this story? Why would this fictional story, and it's just from the imagination of the narrator, why would this fictional story affect Miss Sylvia so much? And remember, back here, we underlined that her name is Miss Sylvia. So there are more clues here. Okay, Miss means she's not married, and she's crying at a story about broken hearts. So perhaps she has had her own heart broken at some point. That's the inference I would make. Let's go on. But you see, Miss Sylvia, I explained, flattered beyond measure that my characters had seemed so real to her, that would spoil the story. It would have no reason for existence then. Its motif is simply his mastery over self. He believes it to be the nobler cause. Okay, so we find out here that the narrator has written the story with its motif, let's call it theme, is his mastery over self. So he has made the dominant decision in this situation. He has done what he felt to be the right thing. And it says he believed it to be the nobler course. So he believed it was the correct thing to do. You could almost say not the moral thing to do, but the correct course of action in this situation. And then Miss Sylvia goes on, no, it wasn't. If he loved her, he should have told her. Think of her shame and humiliation. She loved him, and he went without a word, and she could never know he cared for her. Oh, you must change it. You must indeed. I cannot bear to think of her suffering what I have suffered. Dun, dun, dun. Look at that. Okay, so the cat is out of the bag, guys. Miss Sylvia has revealed her hand as if it was a game of poker. She has said, I cannot bear to think of her being the character in the story, suffering what I have suffered. So now we know our inferences were correct previously. Miss Sylvia has had her heart broken in the past. And this story, written by the narrator, has brought those deeply buried emotions up to the fore, okay? And she is crying. She's finding it difficult to control herself. And she even wants the narrator to change the ending of the story. She wants her to change the story, you know? This is how much this means to her, okay? So I think this is quite important here. You know, I think these things we're discussing here must be important. Because we can see the characterization. The characters are changing. Miss Sylvia's character is changing as the story goes on. And this is something, this is something you need to look out for when you're reading fiction in RLA, GED RLA. Look for the development pattern of the character, the main character or the secondary character. And we can see Miss Sylvia in this story, she started out as some old, meek, lovely old lady sitting outside the hotel, doing her knitting and giving it to young girls. Then she hears a story from one of the young girls and she breaks down in tears, tells her to change the story. She goes into hysterics, okay? So here we have a character development. The characterization of Miss Sylvia is changing as the extract progresses. Now, these type of questions come up all the time. So that's why I said it's important. You need to watch out for these little things. Miss Sylvia broke down and sobbed, okay? She's in pieces here. To appease her, I promised that I would remodel the story, although I knew that the doing so would leave it absolutely pointless. So the narrator has agreed to rewrite the story so Miss Sylvia doesn't get upset again. So the narrator feels sorry. She feels sympathy for Miss Sylvia and her out-of-control emotions that she has experienced. Then 13, I'm so glad, said Miss Sylvia, her eyes shining through her tears. You see, I know it would make her happier. I know it, Okay, so here she emphasizes, I know it. This is her revealing that she connects with this story. The emotions experienced by the heroine in the narrator's story, Miss Sylvia feels that she understands these emotions in a deep way. I'm going to tell you my poor little story to convince you, but you must not tell it to any of the others. So again, Miss Sylvia is being quite secretive here. You must not tell it to any of the others. She's being secretive. Obviously, these are emotions that she does not share, stories she does not share with many people. But because she has revealed her emotions to the narrator, she feels that she can, share them with her in confidence. I know I can trust you, but it's such a poor little story. You mustn't laugh at it, okay? So again, we have some insecurities here. Miss Sylvia is insecure. She thinks, even as an old lady, that the young person might laugh at her, and that will be too much. It's all the romance I had, okay? So this is why her name is Miss Sylvia. We were right at the start, guys, okay? So she didn't have a lot of romance in her life, and let's find out why. Here's the story. Years ago, 40 years ago, when I was a young girl of 20, I learned to care very much for somebody. I met him at a summer resort. Like this. I was there with my aunt, and he was there with his mother, who was delicate. We saw a great deal of each other for a while. He was like no other man I'd ever seen. Oh my goodness, this is quite the love story. You remind me of him somehow. Okay, so this is the first time it's kind of revealed that... Hold on. Sorry, I made a mistake there. You remind me of him somehow. That is partly why I like you so much. I noticed the resemblance the first time I saw you. He was not strong. He coughed a good deal. Then one day he went away, suddenly. Okay, so here we can see that Miss Sylvia's only romance of her life is a mirror image of the short story by the narrator. So this is why she had such a strong emotional response to it. I thought he had cared for me, but he never said so, just went away. Okay, so broken heart. Oh, the shame of it. After a time, I heard that he had been ordered to California for his health, and he died out there the next spring. My heart broke then. I never cared for anybody again. I couldn't. I've always loved him, but it would have been so much easier to bear if I'd only known that he loved me. Oh, it would have made all the difference in the world. And the sting of it has been there all these years. I can't even permit myself the joy of dwelling on his memory because of the thought that perhaps he did not care. Okay, so here we find out Miss Sylvia's story, and yeah, it's a pretty grim one. She hasn't had another lover for 40 years, so it shows you the extent of the psychological trauma this event had in her life. Okay, so let's move on to the questions. What can be inferred about the narrator? Okay, he has little imagination. Well, it can't be that, because the narrator wrote a story. So people who write stories have good imaginations. I think you agree. He's worried about Miss Sylvia. I don't know, maybe. He already knew Miss Sylvia's story. Well, he didn't, because Miss Sylvia only revealed it at the end of our extract. He worried about Miss Sylvia. He studies people very carefully. Well, I would say it has to be C here. Because if you're writing a short story that is about the kind of interaction between humans and the emotional distress that they feel and everything else to do with emotions and story writing, etc., you must study people very carefully. Okay, you could not write a story with that depth if you just didn't observe the world around you. And writers always are very, very intricate with their observations of the world. So I would go with C there. Okay. Now, number 2, which quotation from the passage supports the theme of the passage? Okay, so the theme of the passage here, after reading it, The theme is all about an old lady who had a terrible experience when she was younger. She got a broken heart, and she's very upset about that. She's never got over, she's never recovered from that experience. So it's, a broken heart and never recovering from that. The dangers of a broken heart, let's say. So which quote supports the theme? For the first 2 days after the arrival at the hotel, she sat in the corner alone. No, it's nothing to do with emotional turmoil and never recovering from that. Miss Sylvia liked us all, but I was her favourite. Yeah, it's true, but it's not anything to do with the theme. C, in my own excuse, I must allege that she tempted me to do it. Again, nothing to do with the overall theme of the story, so it must be D here. Oh, no, don't let him go away without telling her, just telling her. Yeah, so this is the one. Okay, it's all about that broken heart, and this directly supports that theme of the broken heart and the terrible experiences that Miss Sylvia had in her youth when she was 20 years old. 3, what effect does the narrator's story have on Miss Sylvia? Okay, well, we know this. She burst into tears, right? She started crying. Her brown eyes, as it tells us, started crying. If you remember that. Here. Yes, she broke down. Miss Sylvia broke down and sobbed. She broke down and cried. So it angers her, doesn't anger her. Irritates her, well, a little bit. Comforts her, definitely not. Irritates her, well, it does more than that. It upsets her. Okay, so it has to be upset. She cries. So this one is the most relevant answer. And then 4. Okay, so which of these adjectives belong to the character web of Miss Sylvia? Okay, so hostile is a very negative word. Hostile means that you're angry and aggressive towards people, usually with very little provocation. So it's definitely not that. Caring, probably. Friendly, probably. Envious means jealous. And we don't see any evidence of jealousy from Miss Sylvia. So it's probably not the negative either. So we're left with these 3 more positive adjectives here. So I would say she's caring. Yeah, she's caring towards the other children at the hotel because she knits them scarves and stuff. So yeah, she's friendly towards the other kids because she has conversations with them. And she's super sensitive because she still gets upset about what happened 40 years ago. Okay, so that's quite self-explanatory there. Number 5, the last one for today. Why is it so important to Miss Sylvia to have the ending of the story changed? Okay, why does she want the story changed? D, she wants the narrator to make the story shorter. No, that's not connected with her negative emotions. She feels the ending is overly complicated. No, that's not relevant. She thinks it would improve the story. Well, maybe, but it's so close to her own experience. It's so close to what she experienced 40 years before, so it brings all these emotions up to the surface and makes her upset. Okay, guys, so that's the first video of this series for the RLA test. I hope you found it useful. If you have any questions or any comments to make, you can make it in the comments below the YouTube video. And I'll see you next time. For now, goodbye.